Past the creaky metal gates, through the fog-enveloped graveyard, you find yourself on the rickety old porch of a long-forgotten home. Beyond the threshold sits a man obsessed, a tortured soul, cursed to discover all about the Southern California haunt community and beyond. You have now entered the domain of the CreepCast with Rick Creeper. You're listening to the CreepCast.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 31. I'm excited. 35. It helps if I keep track of what I'm doing around here. My next guest is a very familiar face and name in the industry, a legendary man who's done it all, seen it all, very talented, from creative mind to an author to hosting his own amazing podcast. I've heard nothing but amazing things about this person. I've had nothing but good impressions, the little interactions I've had, but I've been in character, so you probably don't know my face. A true honor to have him on, Mr. Ted Dougherty. How are we doing, sir?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to be here, and I want to hear about the character that I might have interacted with.
So yourself and John Cook were walking through Goring for the 50th. Mm-hmm. And I think we were known for roasting people the entire time, and I think I roasted you a little bit. And again, the monsters I was with, they know John on a personal level, and he turns around and he's like, man, you guys are so mean. So apparently I did my job. Little factoid. So early episodes, I had Dan Baranowski on. For those who don't know Dan or don't remember the episode, he's a sound engineer, recording engineer, and he's worked for Knott's and he's done other events as well. He shared a story with me that I didn't know you were the voice of Midnight Falls until he shared that with me. And he said that you guys had an in-studio session that there was literally you, him, and a mic, and I believe like a rug on the floor, and you just sat there and you did all the VO, and I thought that was a really cool story. So I wasn't aware that was you until he told me that. So.
Yeah, no, I love Dan Baranowski. I will always work with him any chance I get. I just was working with him this week on some other things.
Nice.
And yeah, when 13th Floor had their warehouse in San Dimas, it's only a couple miles away from where I live in Glendora. We were developing the LA Haunted Hayride, the sort of the reimagining of it. And as a whole story on why there was a radio narration for Midnight Falls, but in response to my times with Dan there, we sat and just kind of created a little corner in this big old warehouse and had to have everybody be quiet as they were building these mazes. And so Dan brought in this great microphone for me to use. We got some good pictures of it, and just working with him, he's such a calm, cool, but very educated, very experienced voice. And I've seen him not only do it with me, but with other folks too. It just brings the best out of these different voice actors. It's just really awesome, and I always love hanging out with him.
I love seeing the guy. He's the biggest teddy bear. Well, perfect gentleman, educated, has tons of experience, but he spoke highly of you, so I thought that was kind of cool. It came full circle. Now you're on here.
Yeah, I speak highly of him because I love him. He's great.
Great guy. So for those that don't know your full history, you weren't shot out of a cannon getting into production and hosting a podcast. Some might now know you actually started off as street talent, correct?
I did, yeah. Many, many years ago now. But I worked at a now defunct scare zone at Not Scary Farm named The Swamp, where Forsaken Lake is now. Uh-huh. And it was a great little scare zone. And I loved every second of working. I loved working with the people there, and I'm still friends with a good handful of them. We keep in touch. Working as a talent, I'm sure many of your listeners who are talent, I mean, it's really kind of like a very intense summer camp kind of vibe, but almost very much like a sports kind of vibe where you just are a team and you're just deep in the trenches with these people. And so these bonds are very tight. And so I worked at the Swamp for a couple of seasons, and then transferred over to Ghost Town and spent a lot of time in Ghost Town. And then I spent one little season one season in 2005. Management had asked me to help out with the new scare zone that they were debuting named the Silver Bullet Mine Town. And so this was their first, Knott's Berry Farm's kind of first exploration on sort of dipping their toes into like an icon character. And so they had this Silver Bullet sheriff that was part of the marketing campaign at that time. He was named Buck because you get more bang for your buck at Knott's Berry Farm.
That's catchy.
And so those were the TV commercials, but the idea was that he would turn into a werewolf and he would be this main character of this scare zone. So they wanted me to be that werewolf. So I because I'm a big werewolf fan. And so I volunteered. I left Ghost Town, my beloved Ghost Town, to work in this new scare zone for a season. And it worked with a lot of great people over there. And it was pretty fun. It was pretty cool. Now the whole icon thing didn't really take off at that point the way they probably anticipated or wanted it to be, but it was certainly their first step. But anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying yes.
No worries.
I think if I start working on in the street program at Knott's.
You were now correct me if I'm wrong. You were one of the face characters in Ghost Town, correct? I believe you were. Remind me who you played in Ghost Town.
So in Ghost Town, I was an undead werewolf from 1885 named Rage. The first iteration of Rage was in a mask. It was a cool foam latex mask that was produced by a company that's no longer, or not really, they may be around, named Scarecrow, but I think they just do fangs nowadays. But it was a really cool foam latex mask. And then when I went to Silver Bullet in 2005, they cast my face to do this new werewolf character. And so did that. But then when I returned to Ghost Town, I kept that prosthetic and then made it kind of Rage 2.0. And so that's what my character was.
So you definitely, I mean, from the level you're at now, you started from the ground up, which to me, it produces the best talent who cross over into production or management or on your end, storyboarding, being a creative writer, because you were boots on the ground. So you got to experience the event from a talent perspective. And I think this is why people like you and Cook and everyone else, they make, once they advance into their career, they're definitely, it showcases their talent because the passion they had for the industry, because they started off like I did, just being a monster, and not just a monster, but as a monster. So looking back, what are some of the biggest lessons you learned out there in the fog, and that still helps you to this today when you're designing like massive experiences for these events?
I think in general terms, just being there and doing it helps me every day in the things that we do nowadays. But I started a little bit older becoming a monster. I was like a hardcore, I'm still a fan, but I was like a diehard fan. Started going to Scary Farm in the 80s through the 90s, and then made an unofficial website, ultimatehaunt.com.
Yes, sir.
And then I got, because of that, I ended up connecting with management and doing interviews with employees and things like that were published and authorized through Knott's and everything. And so by the time I actually crossed the veil and became a monster, I was a little bit older. I was already out of college. And so I think that helped me out a lot because I had to work that much harder to keep up with the youngsters, but also to be very strategic in how I was working, what I was doing, how to take care of my body. I was very, very fortunate to be working with some really amazing talent in the swamp. My scare partner over there was my friend Jeff, and his character name was the Professor. Very analytical guy. He was the first. I don't know if he was the first, but he was the only one that I knew of at the time that was wearing metal knee pads that he had made.
Oh, wow.
And so he had these metal strips and stuff, and he had the different gloves that he did. But he and I worked very closely together in strategizing the best scares that we could do, of different tag teams, various setups and everything. Those are lessons that I learned then that I apply to this day. And so, and then by the time I got into Ghost Town, ended up with a new scare partner, Dan, who was Gemini in Ghost Town, and we kind of did a similar type of strategy in how we would approach this. We weren't necessarily just free roamers and all of that. We were very strategic in how we were setting up scares to ensure that we were getting the most out of our physicality, but while still maintaining good rhythm, but just trying to get quality numbers night after night of scares for these thousands and thousands of guests. So that type of philosophy, strategy is something that I've carried with me all these years, because I think for a lot of people, they just kind of go into it and they have fun and they are scary and they're awesome. And there's a lot of great monsters who do that. But for me, I was very, very aware of what I was doing, how I was doing it. And that allows me nowadays to be able to direct and train the talent that I work with nowadays at these different Halloween events around the country. And so those are the tools of that kind of trade that I developed years ago. But I mean, I know this is another long-winded answer, but
you're fine.
But overall, that's the idea of taking those things that I learned all those years ago and being able to properly take those actions and train folks. I think there's been a lot of great monsters throughout the years, but maybe, and same thing is just like sports or whatever. You may have a good baseball player or football player, but maybe they don't necessarily know how to coach as well. They know how to play well, but they may not be able to necessarily articulate how to do what they're doing for somebody who may not be as experienced or new to that particular sport. So it's this kind of same type of thing of just being able to articulate what we're doing, how to break it down, so that way we can make sure that people are doing it safely and effectively now.
The way you carry yourself, and it makes sense who you are, you weren't just out there running around. You were actually working with someone, maybe possibly leading by example or being a mentor. And I think it has to do you being an older gentleman like myself. I started at the age of 42. I'm 50 now, and I don't know why I'm still running around out there with the younger folk, but it makes sense how you gravitated from being a monster to where you're at now. It's just being an older person with experience, educated, and then you're well-mannered as well. That speaks volumes, and that makes sense where you're at now. But I totally relate. I was 42 when I started with Sinister Point Productions in 2018, and I'm at the farm now, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm still out there with banged up knees and a bad back. But I'm having fun. I'm passionate, and I think retirement's soon. But your story makes complete sense, and I can relate as well. So that makes sense why you're in the position you are.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you're still doing it. And yeah, I think it's just one of those things where it didn't necessarily come natural to me. I definitely had to work hard to do what I wanted to do to ensure I was giving the guests what I felt they deserved.
Totally makes sense. Besides playing the werewolves, which you struck a nerve with me, werewolves, was there any other particular characters that you always wanted to go out and try in the streets and never had a chance to?
Well, when I was in the swamp, I was not a werewolf. I was an undead scientist. And so this was because the swamp was kind of about like this research team. These scientists were uncovering and discovering these creatures that were lurking in the nearby it existed then at the time, Reflection Lake. Mm-hmm. And so I was one of these undead scientists with like a white lab coat that was all bloody and everything. And my mask was another one of those Scarecrow Company masks that was a foam latex, bald, kind of zombie, brain exposed mask. So I loved being that character, and I loved being a werewolf. But since I'm a huge fan of werewolves, that was the only character I wanted to be at Knott's. And so I was so happy when I finally got to be a sliding werewolf monster in Ghost Town. That was like that was my main goal.
That's a hat trick right there. That's wild. I remember back in the day, Ultimate Haunt, and it was pretty much it was pretty much you and TPA where everyone got their information from. And correct me if I'm wrong, you started Ultimate Haunt prior to being a monster, correct?
I did, correct. And so I didn't become a monster until 2001, and UltimateHaunt.com launched in April of 2000.
Got it. What was the original spark that made you want to take that launch into the haunt and just start feeding all this knowledge and history and lore to the masses?
Well, as being a monster or launching Ultimate Haunt?
Launching Ultimate Haunt, sorry. I should have been more specific.
Oh, okay. So what happened was, like I said, I was a huge fan of Knott's Scary Farm every year, just completely obsessed with it, loved it, and would go every year with the same group of guys, my friends from high school and everything. And by the time the internet started to become a lot more accessible to everybody in the late 90s, we kind of do searches online for Knott's Scary Farm stuff, and there wasn't really anything out there. And so one of my friends, Mark, he was one of the people that I would go with every year, and he grew up to become a professional web designer during that internet boom. And so at the time, I did come across Theme Park Adventure. There was another kind of an unofficial Knott's website, and then there were early versions of the official Knott's Scary Farm and Knott's Berry Farm website. And so there were some neat things there, but it wasn't a ton. And I had kept all of my paper programs, my maps every year, and I took a lot of photos, like, with actual cameras and printed photographs all those years, and I kept all that stuff. I'm like, I got a lot of information here, but there's not a lot on the internet. And so I talked to Mark, I'm like, hey, what if we make like an unofficial, or we didn't even call it unofficial, let's just make a website dedicated to Knott's Scary Farm. And so we did, and so it was, Ultimate Haunt is short for the Ultimate Halloween Haunt Experience. Mm-hmm. That's the whole website name. And so we launched it not thinking anything like, geez, I wonder if anybody will look at this. It never occurred to us that like Knott's might trip out on it or anything. And what was great was it launched and it got super popular, like globally. This is way before what we know nowadays of things trending or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But it got really popular to the point where like Knott's was like, oh my gosh, what do we do with this? Because it's getting way bigger numbers than their official website. And so that helped spark the early relationship with Knott's Berry Farm, working with their marketing team. But that was pretty much the early goal, was just to share these pictures and maps and images with people, hoping that we might find somebody out there who has that kind of common interest, and thankfully we did.
Did you ever imagine going from this like super fan and collecting all this information and pulling history that it would lead into the role you're at now? Did you see it gravitate natural over time, or was it something that just came out of left field?
It came out of left field. No, I would have never imagined in a million years. No, I mean, I was a music major in college. I had my eyes set on that kind of thing. And so, no, not at all. It just was one of those situations where I acknowledge it's pretty rare, but you see it sometimes in bands and music and other art forms or sports or whatever, where there's a fan that just kind of gets to a point where they end up becoming involved and then just kind of working their way up the various ranks to being able to do something that they never would have dreamed of. So no, I had no clue at all that I'd ever end up doing this.
I think that's my circumstance. Well, I was a fan forever. I faded away from it. I just one day had the nerve to go audition, and then I'm here now. So like, I don't know how much longer, but we'll see. Speaking of capturing history, you also stepped behind the camera as an associate producer for the definitive documentary seasons of Screams. What was it like taking on that level of ownership to tell the story of the haunt industry on screen, particularly with Knott's? Yeah,
so the website existed, and a company. I remember your monster. Your employee listeners will know what I'm talking about. But I was outside Warehouse P.
Yep.
getting ready to go out for the night, and saw a camera crew like trying to interview people, and one of my friends at the time was one of the people getting interviewed, and he's like, "You need to talk to this guy," and he was pointing at me. And so I met these guys because at that point, Ultimate Haunt had been around for a year or two, and we'd already published like these interviews and published a lot more historical documentation and things like that. Because, by the way, real quick, the whole one of the main reasons Ultimate Haunt was created that I failed to mention was I was always curious about what the event was like before I started going, and there was nothing out there regarding that stuff. And so once I started meeting people like fans like Uncle Mike Hansen and other people who were like, "Hey, we're huge fans and we've been going since 1973. Here's flyers, here's photos." It's like, oh my gosh. So we started publishing all of those types of interviews and photographs on the website. And so we were starting to get the word out there on what kind of the basic history of Scary Farm was. And so the camera crew was my friends Scott Broad and David Love, and so they were filming a segment for Haunted Media Magazine, which is now gone, but it was a video-based magazine that was released like on CD-ROMs at the time. And so I connected with them, and they put out a Knott's Scary Farm issue, and they interviewed me, and I think my buddy Chris Merritt, who's a Knott's Berry Farm historian, co-author of Knott's Preserved. Just amazing former Imagineer. He works for Universal Creative now. Super, super talented. And he also co-wrote the Knott's Berry Tales book too that came out. Anyway, so Dave Love, Scott Broad interview Chris, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's such a bigger story here." And so they decided, hey, we're going to try to do a full documentary on Knott's Scary Farm. And say, okay, so I definitely was helping them and stepped in the role of associate producer, but it took a while. I think that Season of Screams came out in 2004, and so I met them like in 2002, I think. So it took a couple of years to get produced. But meanwhile, I was still meeting people and online and his people who had worked with the event back in the 70s and 80s. And so it was like, okay, let's take all of these people that I've met and did text interviews on the website, and let's interview them on camera for Season of Screams. And so that's kind of what happened. And so we were getting all of these people that I had previously met, plus all of the talent that I was working with at the time. And I always kept that separate. Me working as a talent, like I never publicized on Ultimate Haunt that I worked the event. I kept the fan hat on the whole time. And that was a request that Knott's made back early on when the website was first produced, and I wanted to become a monster. They said, yeah, you could do that as long as you should keep it separate so you don't run the risk of sharing any sort of inadvertently sharing any trade secrets or having people trying to get that stuff from you, that kind of stuff. So I always kept it separate. And so anyways, that's what we did. We did all these interviews with all of the talent, and Season of Screams now is really kind of a timestamp of that era of Scary Farm. But it was a big deal. It was sold at the park for at least a couple of seasons. They had full booths for it. It was in DVD format. And what happened was it's very, very long. And so Dave Love, who directed it and was the main sort of writer on the whole thing, and Scott Broad was the producer, Dave ended up running out of time to get this thing put out, and so he didn't quite edit it the way he ultimately wanted to kind of trim it down. So it's almost kind of like a extended, like almost unedited version, but that's out there now, but so it's super long. I mean, the goal was to make it just 90 minutes or something like that. I think it's over 2 hours now. But whatever. I mean, at least now you have all of that information that's out there. And then not too long ago, I think in conjunction with the 50th anniversary, they just put it up on YouTube for free because it had been out of print. Yeah, it was out of print on DVD for many years, and so they put that out there, which is great. So that way, folks who are interested can look at and see that stamp of in time of what Knott's Scary Farm was like in terms of the all the staff. Like most of the people that were interviewed for that are no longer there at all. And, they interviewed people like Ken Parks on that. Wow. And Ken Parks was directing and writing The Hanging. And that was pretty much all he was doing at Knott's Berry Farm at that time. And now he's, the head creative honcho for all of Six Flags Corporation. But a lot of the folks that are interviewed are no longer there. Certainly the talent, because the talent doesn't have that super longevity. Some people put in the long haul of 15, 20, 30 years or whatever it is, but for the average I think it's probably 5-10 years something. So a lot of folks that were interviewed monsters are no longer there, but it's really kind of neat. And whenever I see it, I always think more of the logistics, and I'm like, okay, I was behind the camera conducting that interview or setting up that scene and helping Dave set up those scenes, or Scott or whoever. So it's I look back on it fondly, and it's really great that it exists as like I said, that timestamp.
The best thing of that video is seeing a young Jerry Paxton with frosted tips and a puka shell necklace and a black tank top, and it's so great. I think I created a meme out of that, actually.
Jerry's great. I've known Jerry for many years, and I mean, we're all older. Looking at some of my friends that are they're just like kids in these interviews, and now we've seen them grow up and get married and have families and bigger careers and all that. So it's really fascinating. As like I said, it's that kind of cool little moment in time. I probably chat with Jerry on a daily basis. We see each other once a month. We play Dungeons and Dragons here at my place. So I love poking fun at him. It's comical. The hair alone was so 2000. I'm like, geez. It's funny. So sir, remind me of your role over at Plague Productions. So at Plague Productions, I'm writer and director for Plague Productions. So for folks who may not know, it's a production company that's owned by my buddy John Cook. John Cook got his start at Knott's Berry Farm many years ago, who designed classic attractions for the event, everything from Special Ops Infected to Paranormal Incorporated to Dark Ride to Shadowlands and many more, the Depths. And so he left Knott's and started Plague Productions, and I helped him because at that point I started working in creative for other entities, other themed entertainment entities, and so we kind of joined forces when he left Knott's, and we together we created like this, what was billed as an R-rated, the world's first R-rated escape room named Murder Co.
Yes, sir.
It is, it's pretty brutal, but we did it and it was fun. And so he eventually sold that, the escape room, and then, but late, like around 2018, somewhere around there, that's when we got involved with 13th Floor doing the LA Haunted Hayride. And then 13th Floor basically just hired him, and he became the creative director for 13th Floor for a few years. So Plague Productions as an entity just kind of went on a hiatus after he left 13th Floor. And I continued working on my own with other themed entertainment companies, as well as working with 13th Floor for different projects. Then after he left, he brought Plague Productions back, and that's been at a furious pace of just working heavily with the Six Flags Corporation, as well as the Cedar Fair corporation before those entities joined.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You two were involved. Well, Plague was involved with, I believe, Dark Harbor in 2019. I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think it was like 17, 18, somewhere around there. Yeah, I think it was 2018 is when we were first brought in to sort of help reimagine what Dark Harbor was. And so they had, I don't know who they were, who was designing their attractions before, but those people were no longer available or around. And so we were brought in by our good friends at Epic Entertainment, and were brought in to reimagine their attractions for Dark Harbor while maintaining the icon characters of Scary Mary and Samuel the Savage,
yes,
and
sir.
on and on, the captain and everybody. So we did that, and then worked closely with another company named Myco 2, David Waldy's company, and they were in charge of all the talent for Dark Harbor. And so we worked on the creative, and then worked kind of in harmony with Myco 2 to ensure that everything that we were doing was going to be well matched with what the talent was going to be doing. So we did that, I think, in 2018. 19, I may be off on my years, a year or two. And so, yeah, we did that. And so, and then the sad thing was like heartbreaking. Like, it did not seem not only Dark Harbor, but the Queen Mary itself would ever come back after the pandemic.
Sadly.
And so it was just shuttered. It was like, oh my gosh. And so slowly but surely, 13th Floor started getting more involved. They brought Shacktoberfest there, which was more in the parking lot. But then John was still with 13th Floor at that time, so worked very heavily on that. Did the scare schools and all of that stuff, or talent training for them. And then the next year after that, they were able to have one of the attractions on the ship, and so there was slowly getting more closer. And then they then 13th Floor took over Dark Harbor, and then I helped them with the reimagining what that would be in 2024, I believe that was. So been very involved. Love the Queen Mary. Love Dark Harbor.
Just to circle back, I was a fan of the Hayride going back to 2011, and
cool.
You saw Plague's involvement, their hands, I believe in 2019 in one of those Midnight Falls. I loved Midnight Falls. I had no idea that was your voice. I'm like, man, this guy's voice is soothing. I could fall asleep to this. This is amazing. And once I got to know different people in the industry, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I was at Dark Harbor in 2019 inside the feast maze, which was beautiful. Okay. I was the chef. And so cool. I saw the influence from your guys' team. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see what's going on, especially with like Rogue and the other mazes. Just beautiful experience. Love the Queen. It was kind of spooky in there, but I definitely saw the impact that Plague yourself had involved, and just the creative team. And I'm like, I had no idea it was you guys. And then now it all makes sense. You went from being talent to you climb the ladder to a point where they're very heavy hitters. Where Plague is they're involved in everything nationally, as far as I know, and I love it. I personally was casted by David Wally, and the one role I did not want was the chef. And me being a second-year monster, I'm like, don't make me the chef. Please don't make me the chef. He hands me a pamphlet. He's like, you're going to love this role. And I opened it up. I'm like, I'm the second chef. Great. And then the one who was the chef, my buddy, Tim Bob Jones, who played the chef for all their media and for the likeness. And this giant man, it's a gentle giant, and he was like, who's the other chef? And I'm like, oh, great. And we became best friends. But an amazing event, beautiful. I love everything you guys have done. I've heard about nothing good things. That's just me kissing up to you guys pretty much. So, yeah.
Well, but I mean, the talent for any of these events is what bring any of these different attractions to life. And certainly Chef was a big deal for Feast on bringing that to life, and telling that kind of story. So I appreciate what you did, and all the others as well. And I know David Wally did too. Not
only you're a creative writer, but you're also an author. So I like to talk about the book. What inspired you to create a book? What was the driving force behind that? And what was the name of the book again, sir?
So the original title was Knott's Halloween Haunt, A Picture History, and that was released in 2012 in conjunction with the 40th anniversary of Knott's Scary Farm. The reason it was I made it was I was still a talent at Knott's Scary Farm in the late 2010, so like around 2008, 2009. Season of Screams had already been out for a while. The UltimateHaunt.com was plugging away still. And there were rumors at that time that Knott's Berry Farm might be sold. And I don't remember who it was to or anything like that, but it was enough to where it's like, it was scary. It's like, oh my gosh, if Knott's gets sold, what happens to our beloved Knott's Scary Farm? And so I thought, okay, listen, if Knott's gets sold, these stories, whatever they have in their archives, little archives they had, it's like, okay, that might all be lost, because I had known that they had tossed a lot of stuff away. Knott's didn't keep great archives of Scary Farm for a long time, just simply because they didn't think it was that big of a deal, especially when the Knott family still owned the park. It was just like, this is just a seasonal event to help us make some additional revenue in the off season. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And so Knott's is maybe getting sold, panic. It's like, okay, I need to start documenting this stuff a lot more, because despite the 3-hour documentary being out there and despite all the different interviews that I had on my website, there were still some blaring questions that had been unanswered on how this event became so huge. And so I thought, all right, well, I'm going to take the dive and just start doing anything and everything I can to document this stuff. And as I started to do that, I realized this is not all going to fit on the website. And so I decided it was a big decision to do that at the time of like, okay, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this as a book, and had to get Knott's Berry Farm's blessing, so that way I could get through their archives and conduct all the interviews I needed. So it took 2 years for me to do that. And it took over 80 interviews of people who past and present, going on my own to like places like Cal State Fullerton's library, and spending every Saturday and Sunday morning over there going through microfilm and just trying to find newspaper articles of everything, going back from the very beginning every year up until then, of tracking down people's names who were mentioned in these articles, and then going home and then like Googling and like trying to like do detective work trying to find these people. And so that's what I did. And so thankfully the book came out for the 40th, and we did all kinds of book signings was their haunt museum that they did for the 40th, which is kind of where Town Hall is now, kind of kitty corner across the street from Schoolhouse Road, or the Schoolhouse on Schoolhouse Road, and it's the old bonnet shop. And so worked very closely with Knott's, and they didn't know what they had. It completely sold out the very first weekend, and so we had to do multiple printings just for that first season. And so it was just crazy. Just I think I did like 10 book signings on the weekends over at Scary Farm during the event. It was wonderful. And then the book was sold there for years, and it just kind of went out of print. And then for the 50th anniversary, did kind of the same thing. I updated it, brought it up to date, and fixed any kind of typos that drove me nuts, that kind of stuff, for the first edition. So we did an updated second edition for the 50th anniversary, but the event was no longer known as Halloween Haunt, and so the branding simply was Knott's Scary Farm, and so the book was retitled The History of Knott's Scary Farm, and so that was released in 2023 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary.
Speaking of the 50th, how was that handling that, let's say, your involvement with the 50th, from the store to some of the mazes that I believe you guys were involved in? Do you feel that your experience and on top of your passion segued and kind of spearheaded that drive to get that event prepared? Or as far as your perspective, from your point of view?
Well, I think what happened for the 50th is John Cook and I knew how big of a deal that is. It's such a huge milestone. And so the idea was we worked very closely with Ken Parks, and I remember we just sat like a couple late nights. It was late here on the West Coast, but it was even later for Ken, who lives in North Carolina. And we just brainstormed on what the 50th could be. And so that's kind of what happened. And then John Cook and I also continued to brainstorm, and we basically put pitch decks together and pitched Cinema Slasher, the Chilling Chambers, and the Legacy Store. Mm-hmm. And so the idea was the Chilling Chambers would certainly be kind of this homage to the past, kind of a tribute maze. Cinema Slasher didn't necessarily start as a tribute maze, but it kind of defaulted to that. But overall, it was more about like, okay, what would happen if we stepped through the screen inside this really haunted movie theater and these slasher movies came to life. Mm-hmm. And then for the Legacy Store, that was a big deal because we knew the book was coming back. We wanted a place for me to do these book signings because I did the book signings there. It sold out multiple times again and all that stuff. So it was wonderful. But we also wanted to pay like more of a actual tribute to these items, to these the past of Scary Farm. So worked very closely with our friend Jeff Shattuck, who's the head of park decor at Knott's Berry Farm, who really helped bring the museum portion to life. And then at that point, Play Productions is in full swing. So a lot of that was just all fabricated by Plague Productions, and we outsourced some wonderfully talented people to come and assist us. So all of the tombstones and everything, and all of the tributes inside the Legacy Store was all very deliberate as a huge celebration for the 50th. And so we felt we wanted to give the 50th anniversary the love that we felt it deserved, and try to make it as not only a fun, nostalgic experience for the guests, but also to use it as a way to kind of launch what the event could be with more innovations of things like what we were doing in Cinema Slasher, and just trying to push the envelope a little bit more in terms of the production. And so for Cinema Slasher, John and I created it, but we also worked very closely with our friend Daniel Miller, who was the assigned art director to that, who's been at Knott's Berry Farm as a designer for many, many years. And then Chilling Chambers, we were teamed up with Gus Kruger, and so worked closely with him for bringing that attraction to life as well.
Now, I loved some of the Easter eggs you guys had inside the store. I believe was the staircase with the jack-o'-lanterns, which is homage to Trick or Treat. Am I correct?
It is. And it's all filled with Easter eggs. Like at the base of that staircase, framed on the wall, is one of the original Green Witches and me and my first iteration of Rage.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's peppered all over the place not only is the building sections of the staircase things like a tribute to a Trick or Treat, but things like all the Carnival references, mm-hmm. and on and on and on. Yes.
I love the tombstones of retired mazes that were placed throughout the store. And I'm like, whoa, I remember that maze. I remember that. And Dark Ride, me personally, was one of my favorite mazes. Mm-hmm. Speaking of mazes, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were the co-designer for Origins, The Curse of Calico?
Well, I wrote that maze, worked with John on that. And so that was during that time before he was hired by 13th Floor. And so we were brought in as outside contractors, Play Productions was. And so, at that time, Ken Parks was the vice president of entertainment for Knott's Berry Farm. And he brought us in because there had been this thought for a while of can we do a maze based on sort of the story of what the Green Witch is? And so I'd already had that story as an unofficial story that is a whole long other story, but that was published on Ultimate Haunt a long time ago. And so we thought, okay, well, what if we take some of these ideas that we've had in the past and actually take what I know from my experience in attraction, design, approach, take John Cook's experience in design and approach, and let's do this right in a way that is breathtaking and putting it in a way that we felt that kind of character deserved. And so yes, so we were very much involved with Origins, and John was there helping the teams build it and everything, and then yeah, we're doing the scare schools and all of that, and working with the managers at the time to train all the talent for Origins, because we wanted to have this be a little bit different compared to the traditional mazes that we're seeing at Not Scary Farm. So we're very proud of it, and it's really kind of lasted a long time, which is great.
I believe it's on its, I might be almost 8th or 9th season. I might be wrong, but I love the maze personally because it takes me back to the early years when I experienced haunt. You know, where you saw dusters, you saw cowboys, you saw cowboy hats and saloon girls, and I love how it's called Origin. It's what happened to the people of Calico, to the segue of the Green Witch, but it's a very tip of the hat to the early years, the golden, what I refer to the golden era of haunt, the 90s and the early 2000s. That's why I love the maze. So,
oh well, I'm glad that you love it. Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's. I remember, so Bill, who's head of wardrobe, I would go. When we were developing it, we were like, okay, I want to see like the old prosthetics that you haven't been using in years. So he took me to this back room, and there's like this huge wall of all the old prosthetics and names and stuff. I'm like, well, let's pull this. And so if anybody remembers, toward the end of Origins, there's some static characters. Well, it's actually throughout kind of the last third of the maze where there's static characters that have various monster faces, and those are all handpicked by me or John, of like, okay, these are characters of that people that I worked with. There was a wonderful head of makeup when I first started, Melanie Smith, who passed away not long after I started. But she was awesome. I got along great with her, and she was the one who like oversaw all of the makeup and the orchestration of like the sculpting of the different prosthetics and everything. And so I purposely knew, like, I knew one of the last prosthetics that she made. I put that in Origins as well, as kind of 99.99% of the people would never ever know that, but it was like something that meant a lot to me, of like ensuring that was in there, that kind of thing. So that whole maze is filled with those types of little, some subtle, some not so subtle references to the past.
I love seeing the Easter eggs from the Haunted Shack in there as well, if I'm not mistaken. It's so cool.
Yeah.
It just takes me back. It makes me feel like a kid, even though I'm 50 years old. So cool. So
I love that.
I love it, dude. You guys do an amazing job. So we mentioned earlier you were the voice of Midnight Falls, which I believe was Midnight Falls Radio. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the entertainment director for the LA Hayride when you guys were involved with the production of that event.
Yeah, like the live entertainment director. So I was in charge of all the talent. Yes,
that is amazing. How did that come to be?
So that's what it was. So it was one of those things where 13th Floor purchased the LA Haunted Hayride. I don't know when, but somewhere in the 2015, 16, somewhere around there, 17. I don't know. But they were letting it run the way it had been run previously, and they were like, okay, well, it's time to kind of update this. So 13th Floor was very aware of John Cook and about his work with not only Knots, but Murder Co. by that time and all of that. And so that's when they brought him in, and he became the creative director for the LA Haunted Hayride. But it was still, that first year was still under like Play Productions. It was before they hired him full time. Yes. And so that's how that happened. And so at that point, I was already working with him. And I remember we were driving around at night. I remember we were looking for something to eat for dinner or something. We were just throwing around different names of like, you know, do we want to call this like Ravenhall, Ravenhill? And eventually we were texting. The conversation kept going for a couple days of what we would call this fake town, because we knew that that's what we wanted it to be, was this fake town. Because I'm a huge fan of like John Carpenter's The Fog and things like that, where there's these towns that kind of just turn into something horrific happens to them. And The Fog is kind of narrated by the DJ. So we're like, okay, well, we could do that, and we'll tie every attraction, everything ties back to this idea of what Midnight Falls was. And so, yeah, I just remember at one point he just texted me. He's like, what about Midnight Falls? And I'm like, yeah, I think that works. And so we did that. And so I think one of the things that we purposely tried to do was like, let's make this different. Let's have the story of Midnight Falls, where it's always caught in on Halloween night, 1985. Or I think it's 1985 now. I can't remember, but it's like it's like a timestamp of like it's caught in this loop, and the characters don't know it. They don't know that there's anything wrong. They're always celebrating its 13th annual Halloween festival, and it's on this loop over and over and over again. And all the attractions, the hayride itself, and all the walkthrough mazes, all tied back to that story of what Midnight Falls is. And so that gave it very specific purpose, and it made my job a lot easier when it came to casting and training the cast because it was something that they could easily cling on to and easily comprehend. Because, you know, with some of these attractions, sometimes if the story gets too convoluted, you don't understand what's happening.
Yes, sir.
You become disconnected, and it's like, okay, well, we don't care anymore. We just want to get scared. So we didn't want people feeling that way. And so we wanted to ensure, for example, like in the town square of Midnight Falls, we knew we had these characters that were kind of represented like all of your small town USA type of characters, but they looked horrific, but they weren't acting horrific. We didn't want them scaring the daylights out of everybody, because the guests wouldn't interact with them. They wouldn't talk with them. They wouldn't get to know them, because they would be running away from them. And so we trained those characters to be a lot more theatrical, so that way they could in character educate the guests as to what is transpiring here in Midnight Falls. And so we wanted them friendly and approachable, even though some of them could be a little bit snide. But the idea was the idea is just to really make them feel like they're engaging and welcoming, but also educating the guests as to what is transpiring. So that way, for the mazes, for the hayride itself, that way we could focus more on the traditional scares and set everything up. But all of those attractions had purpose, because they were all drawn back to that story.
I remember seeing, I believe it was Neon of the, it was the name of the radio show, or the radio station. And I remember hearing your voice, and I'm like, this is so cool. It's like a radio station. Who's this dude with this like really soothing voice? And I'm like, it's so cool. And I loved when the actual hayride ended, I believe in a cemetery. And then as we pulled up, you hear the punk band, the Misfits, playing, and there's all these 80s punk rockers, and they were monsters, and they were just like kind of partying in the cemetery. That was this coolest thing. Speaking of your voice, you went from being the man behind the creative curtain to the man behind the microphone. What made you want to take the plunge of starting your own podcast, which the name is Working the Fright Shift with Ted Dougherty, of course? What was the inspiration behind that? And trust me, I know it's a lot of work. I've been doing this since 2019 off and on. So you have the voice for it. You have the education. But what made you take that plunge to go into that avenue?
Well, what happened was the History of Not Scary Farm book was released. The 50th anniversary came and went. We sold out. We went through multiple printings. It was awesome. It was a wonderful experience. But knowing how the first edition of the book kind of just, after it went out of print, it completely just disappeared and it was gone. And so I knew the same thing was going to ultimately happen with this second edition. And so, but I didn't want those stories to get lost. And so what I opted to do was do the audiobook for the History of Not Scary Farm. That way, that's available through Apple or Spotify or whatever, where anybody listens. So that way, they still have those stories that are preserved long after the book is out of print. So I did that, and that was a lot of work and a lot of fun, but it happened. And so, but John Cook liked it a lot, and so he's like, I love your voice. You should really think about doing a podcast. I'm like, really? And so he's like, yeah, because you have all of these friends in the industry. And so my thinking was, okay, well, there are a lot of sort of behind the scenes stories that I have that I haven't really been able to share via like interviews like this, because maybe I don't think of them at the time or whatever. And I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity to share some fun behind the scenes anecdotes and stories. And I'm a huge horror fan in general. And so I could talk about some of my favorite horror movies and with the history behind them, or icons or stories or books or whatever. But also I could share some behind the scenes stories about me and my work, and then also bring in some different guests to talk about their work and their history within the industry. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just do this and just see how it goes. And so I've done it, and it's been fun. We've done 2 seasons. It's been a lot of fun being able to interview different people. I understand what you're saying. It is a lot of work. It's not easy. It's a lot of time and research and just trying to get things right. It's just like, oh my gosh. So if bandwidth allows, I will continue doing it. But at this point, I'm good with finishing out the second season not too long ago, and we'll see where the future goes. But it's been a lot of fun.
It's a great outlet. I love to showcase people like yourself. I'd usually cut it off about August, because of course we gear up for Haunt, but I love it. Yeah, the artwork is great. You have an amazing voice, so I definitely support it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, sir, you've done many things. You wore many hats, from a monster to a creative writer to being a podcast host. What would be your advice to a young, let's say, scare actor who's thinking of transitioning into other roles in the community? What advice would be to them?
Well, believe it or not, I get asked this question a lot. So one thing I didn't mention that we haven't talked about, but it's something I am very proud of, is during the pandemic, a friend of mine, Morgan, put together this online school for folks. She was seeing that, because she's a themed entertainment director and extremely talented artist, but she was seeing that a lot of these grad students who were graduating during the pandemic and stuff just weren't getting any kind of experience in themed entertainment. So she put together an online school that provided some real world lessons from different industry experts. And so she taught classes and had brought in a lot of amazing people to be professors, they're teachers for this online school that she had developed. And so she asked me to do it. And so I did that for show writing, creative writing for these types of Halloween experiences. And so we did it for a full year and a half or something. And then she ultimately moved on to other things with Disney, and that kind of got shut down. And then meanwhile, another friend of mine, Brandy, who's over at Universal Studios, started up somewhat of a similar but different but similar type of program named the Essential Art Department. Again, this is more our art centric, more focused on how to put these types of events together for themed entertainment. And so I took the classes I was teaching at Morgan's and modified them to work with Brandy's program, and started teaching these different classes. And I did that for the Essential Art Department for I think over a couple of years or something. And so I'm not really involved with it as much nowadays. But the point is we're giving students, people, opportunities to learn about this industry, taking things that I learned throughout the years of being able to share that information. Obviously, I couldn't share the actual work I was doing because that's all under non-disclosure agreements. But so I created fake attractions to show them what real world expectations would be in terms of format and how to present this. And meanwhile, I am teaching them basic ideas on scare philosophy and things like that, and the history of all of this stuff. And so hopefully giving them a nice, well-rounded basic foundation in what this industry is in terms of my little pocket of this stuff. And so the idea then is, okay, hey, in answer to your question, if you're new to this stuff, get involved in the Themed Entertainment Association, because that's how a lot of these people found Morgan's school, later on Brandy's school. There's the TEA Next Gen at a lot of universities. When I started, there was no real themed entertainment classes at universities. Now they have them at SCAD in Georgia, as well as UCF in Florida. But we didn't have those things. And as of right now, you can't really major in haunting. And so we're trying to give people the best opportunities to learn this stuff the best they can, because I didn't have anything like that. And John Cook didn't have anything like that. He always jokes that his college was Knott's Berry Farm, where he had to learn on the fly on how to do this with great people giving him an opportunity to learn on the job. And so that's kind of the basic idea, is making sure that people can get involved with their various associations, because they do exist. But also there is Haunt Comp, which a few of my former students developed kind of during the pandemic, which is a haunted house design competition. And it's from students around, or people from around the world have teams that are able to create these different attractions. They're given prompts and stuff, but the judges are people like me and other folks from Knott's and Universal and Brandy and people like that, who help guide the different teams in education, in educating them on what the professional level expectations are. So now there's opportunities that people didn't have before if they want to get more into the creative or production world. And my number one bit of advice for anybody looking to get into this: go work as a monster. There's so many opportunities to do that now, with home haunts to theme parks to independent haunts. So it doesn't matter if you're outside of Los Angeles and you don't have a major theme park around you. Maybe if you're in the Midwest or the East Coast, you've got plenty of Six Flags all over the place now. But if it's not that, you could go to a great independent haunt and just learn everything you can. But the first step is just, if you're a monster, you can find out, hey, this is for me or it's not for me. But you can at least try to see what the behind the curtain is like and see if it's something that you really want to get into.
Well, you definitely paved the path for a lot of people. You're a prime example of what you could accomplish with just tenacity and hard work and passion. And I appreciate that. And I love that about you guys, you the creatives. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
You've definitely worn multiple hats, which speaks character. Where can we find you, Ted?
Me? Well, I'm on Instagram at Ultimate Haunt, and as well as Working the Fright Shift too, at Working the Fright Shift. And at Ultimate Haunt, that's kind of where I share a lot of, some of the my adventures in the scary world of entertainment, and but also family vacations and all of that stuff too. And then Working the Fright Shift is pretty much solely where we will announce different upcoming segments and different guests.
And are you available on major platforms as well, as far as the podcast?
Oh yes, the podcast is on it's on Spotify. I think it's Apple. Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere you go to stream your podcast.
Cool. And what I do with every episode, I'll put links to where they can find you online, where they can find the podcast. Is the book still available? Refresh my memory.
It is not currently, but there might be some opportunities in the near future as we are recording this in summer of 2026. There might be some online opportunities in the near future, or maybe in-person opportunities in the near future at events outside of Knott's. But stay tuned. Maybe something will be announced fairly soon.
Sounds cool. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on. Everybody, Ted's an amazing man. Listen to his podcast. He's the man with the Hunt Golden voice. That's what I want to call him. I mean, from here on out. But thanks, Ted. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for everyone listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.
You're listening to the CreepCast. You've once again barely escaped the clutches of the CreepCast with Rick Creeper. Next time, you may not be so lucky. To find out more about the CreepCast and Rick Creeper, follow Rick on Instagram at RickCreeper11. Until next time, be sure to keep that lantern light burning. You never know what could be lurking out there in the dark.
This episode of the CreepCast is brought to you by Haunted Whittier. I've known the owner, Jacob Caputo, for a couple of years now. We've actually worked together over at Not Scary Farm. And on top of that, I've actually done these tours. Myself being a veteran of the haunt industry, I can tell you this, the experience is very top-notch. Jacob's a total history buff, so when he takes you through these locations, he's giving you the real documented history along with the hauntings. Here's what to expect. Pio Pico's mansion, the eerie, real-life legacy of the last Mexican governor here in California. This one's pretty cool, actually. Historical ghost walks explore the documented spirits, the dark side of Uptown Whittier. Museum flashlight tours, that sounds kind of spooky. A pitch-black journey through the Whittier Museum. Because he knows the history so well, these stories really resonate with you. You can follow them on Instagram at Haunted Whittier Tours or on Facebook at Haunted Whittier. And also, head over to hauntedwhittier.com to grab your tickets and make sure you tell Jacob that Rick Creeper sent you. Hey guys, this is Rick Creeper 11 again. I just want to say thank you so much for being supportive of the podcast since its inception. Is that the word? Since 2019, for every episode when I was at Sinister Point, Dark Harbor, Midsummer Scream, and down at the Scary Farm. You're the reason why I do this. You're the reason why I put in the time, the effort, and the labor, because if I could create something for you that's going to distract you for a minute or make your ride, enjoyable on the way to work or home, or just have you check out from all the BS that's going on in the world, it's all worthwhile. So thank you again to all the supporters. Thank you for the listeners out there. Thank you for all the fans, the guests at Scary Farm, everyone who's been involved somehow, indirectly or directly, everything I've done. You're the reason why I did it. And it feels good to be back. And yeah, man.
What does a mime look like when he's having sex anyway? Probably like, I'm a mime. I'm a mime.